It is often the case that although we tend to enjoy a story for its great action, its great character development, or its thrilling stories, it is often the major emotional points of a story that we tend to cherish, we tend to remember most of all. And that is true even amongst animes. And although the most popular animes are the ones that are action-packed, such as Dragon Ball, or One Piece, or Bleach, or Naruto, even amongst those stories, it is often the emotional points of those stories that we tend to remember. And amongst the many different animes, there are animes that are completely focused towards stirring the emotions, bringing up the feelings of the viewers. And many of these are ones that you will remember for a long time. Amongst the ones that are quite famous are the ones from Studio Ghibli, such as Grave of the Fireflies or My Neighbor Totoro. But even the other studios that have come up have developed some very touching animes. And if you are into ones that may stir your emotion, just dig deep into your heart and bring up feelings that you may have had in terms of sadness, joy, triumph, and anguish, then these animes can bring up those feelings, oftentimes reminding you that these sorts of deep, heavy emotions are often more impactful than even the strongest action battles. And amongst the recent animes, there are 3 memorable works that I feel are extremely well made. One became so popular that it is now the highest grossing anime film in history, but I feel the other 2 are equally impactful in terms of emotional content, and so I wanted to introduce these 3 animes. The titles of these 3 animes are Your Name, Silent Voice, and Maquia, When a Promised Flower Blooms. And these are animes with very different stories and very different themes, but they do touch you in one way or another, and they may have more impact depending upon what you have experienced in the past. But between these 3, I would feel that you would find one of these to at least be of very strong emotional content. So the first of these anime that I would like to talk about is Your Name. It is an anime directed and written by Makoto Shinkai and produced by Comics Wave Films. It was an anime that came out in 2016 and is now considered the highest grossing anime film in all of history. And this movie has received worldwide acclaim for its unique storyline and its huge emotional content. And it revolves around 2 people, a young girl named Mitsuha and a young boy named Taki, and their growing relationship, which eventually asks the question, just how far would you go to find that very special soulmate that you care for, even if you're in a situation where you don't even know the other person's name? And this very unique situation arises because of a body swapping situation. Yes, I am not a major fan of body swapping stories such as Freaky Friday. I've never been interested in that sort of storyline, especially when it involves a boy and a girl, because of the possibility of it going into some very colorful stories which I'm not particularly interested in watching. However, thankfully, it stays away from that sort of storytelling, aside from the very beginning, in the initial awkward moments when the boy wakes up in the girl's body. He doesn't know what's going on, so he tries to do a slight investigation, at which point the girl's younger sister walks into her room, sees her, and thinks that she has gone completely crazy. But it stays away from that sort of situation. Luckily, the boy is relatively chivalrous sort of person, and the girl make sure that the boy doesn't do anything strange by leaving notes in the room whenever she is in her own body for the boy to read whenever the body swap occurs. And of course, in the beginning, this body swapping causes a lot of problems because their change in personality makes all their friends and their family extremely concerned that they are going crazy. And of course, this results in those two characters hating each other for a little while. However, as their body swapping adventures continue, they find that there becomes a strong bonding between each other because they find emotional support in each other. They find out that the other person has a different point of view than they do, and because of that, they can give advice under various situations which helps each other work well with their families, their employers, their friends, their schools, their teachers, and this becomes a very strong bonding that they can find emotional support between each other because they know each other so well. Of course, this eventually gets to the point where they want to get to know each other more, and they go out of their way to try to find each other. And this is really where the story begins, because fate has made sure that they would not find each other no matter how much they tried. And this story is once again all about the tenacity, the desire, the efforts that these two people will do to try to overcome fate to bring them together. And this, of course, becomes very difficult and becomes very emotional because eventually their body swapping stops. And what they realize is their memory of each other is starting to fade. And so they're trying to do whatever they can before they forget each other to see if they can get together. And I will avoid going into any more detail than this because I don't want to create any spoilers, but I can tell you that this is a very emotional story about sadness, about desire, about effort, about courage, and about the relentless efforts that two people will do to try to see if they can get together no matter how much fate does to keep them apart. And because of that, I feel that this is a very unique story even amongst all these body swapping stories, and I could understand why this movie has received so much critical acclaim. Yes, this movie is emotionally moving, and I would recommend it to anybody who is interested in seeing a very romantic movie with regards to spiritual love almost as much as romantic love. And so this brings us to A Silent Voice, which is another anime movie that revolves around a relationship between a girl and a boy. However, the theme for this movie is very much different from Your Name. It is a movie that was written by Reiko Yoshida and directed by Naoko Yamada. And it was a movie that was released in 2016. And of the three movies that are discussed in this video, this is the one that is probably the most down to earth as it doesn't involve any sort of supernatural event. This is basically just a standard movie about everyday people. However, it is probably the most painful and gut-wrenching of the three movies as it delves into a problem that we often see in society. You see, A Silent Voice deals with the theme of bullying. But unlike a lot of other stories that have dealt with this sort of theme, it doesn't go into the crime and then the justice and the revenge to the bully, but instead goes into the pain and the responsibility, the redemption, and the forgiveness of two people despite all the pain that they had in the past. And unlike a lot of the other bullying sort of stories, this one takes it from the point of view of the bully. And it goes through the pain and the anguish that the bully will have to go through to resolve and correct a lot of the problems that this person has made. And eventually, what you hope is that he will receive forgiveness from the other people around him, and with that, he can actually forgive himself. The story revolves around a young boy named Shoya Ishida who's in grade school. He is a very energetic boy who can't get enough of life and wants to get as much out of life as possible. He thinks life is an adventure. He wants to cherish it as much as possible. And within his life and his class comes a new transfer student named Shouko Nishimiya. Now Shouko turns out to be a deaf girl, and because of her physical impairment, she also has problems speaking. And this of course initially intrigues Shoya because he has never seen such a person. And of course his curiosity gets the best of him and he starts kind of testing her out, trying to see just how deaf she is. However, as things keep on going, he starts kind of getting irritated because of the fact that she just doesn't fit into the crowd and she doesn't understand why she isn't willing to take her time to try to fit into her crowd. Why does she not try to speak better, for example? And this starts irritating him more and more as time goes on. He thinks that there's something very strange with her, and all of his classmates agree. And in fact, his classmates ask him, being the kind of the leader of the class, to make an example of Shouko. However, as time goes on, and as he continues to try to make an effort to lead the group to show this girl that she doesn't belong, that eventually his bullying becomes apparent to everybody in the school, and that creates a problem. And at that point, he finds out that he is all alone because all of his friends have decided to throw him under the bus and point to him as being the only bully, to which they had tried to stop him, but he ignored their advice and kept on bullying the girl. What Shoya eventually finds out then is that these people then start bullying him. And this of course starts confusing him. He's not sure why he's the only victim of this entire incident, and he starts getting angry at everybody, including Shouko, who he feels is the reason for him being bullied. And he keeps on looking at her and he still feels that she just doesn't belong. She acts very weird, like he would keep on coming into class and see that she is obsessively wiping somebody's desk, and he's like, what is this weird girl doing? And eventually it gets to the point that his rage to everybody, including the girl, gets so high that eventually they separate. She goes and transfers to another school. And it is at that time that he finally realizes that the problem was himself, that he was the bully. It wasn't that he was trying to do something righteous by trying to resolve a problem and be the hero to everybody else. What he found out was he was the bully. And in fact, what he found out was even that obsessive wiping of the desk was actually his desk after all the other students had written things like "die, go kill yourself" on the desk. Every morning when she saw all of those messages, she would try to wipe them all away. And at this point, he does finally realize that he has made a mistake, that he was the problem all along. But it was too late at this point to be able to resolve and make everything okay. And it is at this point of the story that the story really actually begins, because then there is a skip to 5 years later. He is a high school student, and at that point he is a complete recluse because of the fact that he has become a victim of constant bullying. to the point that he no longer can communicate effectively with anybody around him. He sees them as just strangers, and he doesn't even recognize the faces of the people around him. And it's at this point that he once again meets Shouko. And this is a story with regards to forgiveness, with regards to support, with regards to pain and anguish, because both these characters feel that it is their fault that the other person felt pain. In Shoya's case, of course, it's obvious. It is his bullying that has caused her so much pain and anguish. But Shouko also feels that she has always been a burden to everybody around her, including her family, who of course tries as much as possible to help her, but she can feel the pain of the burden she causes to everybody, even in her family. And she was especially hurt by the amount of bullying that Shoya received because of the fact that she felt that she was the reason he was being bullied. And so this results in two people who feel inadequate in the world trying to help each other to come back to the world. And so this is an absolutely beautiful story that's absolutely painful to watch. It is extremely heartbreaking to watch these two people have to go through the pain and the agony to try to get to a level of acceptance of each other and of the world. And there are brutally tough scenes in there. There is one scene where there's a certain incident that occurs to which the girl gets once again blamed for being who she is, and because of that the incident occurs. And there is one point where she is in tears and screaming out to all of the people around her, "I'm so sorry," with the broken language that she says. "I'm so sorry for being who I am, and I'm so sorry for causing you anguish," and it brutally breaks you down, watching her have to apologize for just being who she is. And so A Silent Voice is an anime that I will have to say is not for everyone. If you're looking for a swashbuckling adventure and a feel-good sort of inspirational movie, then this one is definitely not it. However, if you are interested in a movie where two people can support each other and care for each other, and despite all the anguish that the world may provide, can try to do everything possible to strive through it, then I would say that A Silent Voice may be a movie you may not want to miss. And so this brings us to our final piece, which is called Maquia, When the Promised Flower Blooms. And just like the other two movies, this is a story about human interaction. However, unlike the other two movies, it doesn't involve two lovers, but it involves a mother and a son. It is an anime written by Mari Okada and produced by PA Works. And it was brought out in 2018 and asks the question with regards to the desires of being immortal. And it is a fantasy-like story set in a medieval sort of society. And in this world, there is a race of people called the Eorfs, who, if not immortal, at least have a really long lifespan, much longer than the typical human. And they live in an isolated part of the world, separated from rest of society, and they live a very peaceful lifestyle, weaving a tapestry known as the hibio. And each tapestry, through its stitch pattern, gives a story of the weaver and its world around them. And the story revolves around one of the Eorfs called Maquia. She is a 15-year-old naive girl who is still having the wonderment of the world and the questions of life. She is a very introverted girl who often envies and admires her closest friend, Layla, who is considered one of the best weavers of the Hibyo and a very outgoing and optimistic personality. And it is about the lifestyle of these two people when fate has it that they are sent out of their own world. In the case of Layla, it is due to the outside world coming to take her away due to their own political requirements. And for Maquia, it is an accidental situation that leaves her stranded alone in the outside world to fend for herself. Being alone and left stranded outside in this harsh world, Maquia for a certain time thinks about taking her own life, but right at that moment, she stumbles upon a young baby. A baby whose parents has just died, and she decides right at that point that she will be the one that will raise this child. And so this is a story about a mother and a son. And just like with many of these types of stories, it goes through the trials and tribulations of growing together. However, this one does it with an ironic twist in which the mother, no matter how much she emotionally and personally matures and grows with the child, remains in the body of a 15-year-old. And so the story is viewed in three different ways. The first is through the eyes of a young girl who sees that the world and the people around her continue to evolve and change, while she is the one unchanging factor, the one that feels like she is left behind while the world and life moves along independent of her. And then the second, which is probably the most important, is the story between a mother and a child. And in this case, trying to raise the child in a proper, loving manner, despite the handicap of having the immortality place her in a situation where she will always remain a 15-year-old girl to the eyes of that child. And finally, the oppression and pain that immortality can bring when the greed of the political society around them wants to exploit the immortality of that said person. And even if that person has the most positive of personality, that exploitation and that oppression can even break such a person down. Now, despite the fantasy-like setting and the political style of plot, you're not gonna have a complex political story in Maquia. And so if you're looking for something like that, you may find this story to be disappointing. This is a lifestyle story, and the political environment is there only to help enhance the lifestyles of these people. However, if you are a person who has dealt with family, with close friends, and the possibility of a loss of many of these close people, whether they are a significant other, a parent, a child, a best friend, or even a pet, then many of these people who watched this movie have said that this is possibly the most emotional of the three movies in this video. And so in the end, none of these three movies will ever be remembered for their political intrigue or their action adventure or their complex plot. However, if you value movies that touch your heart, that touch your soul, that potentially can affect your life based upon the feelings that you receive from the movies rather than the stories that you see in these movies, then these movies may become very valuable additions to the library of such stories. Well, that's it for this video, and I hope you found these introductions to be useful. I'll leave a link to the trailers for all 3 of these movies in the description section of this video. And if you are interested in these movies, then I would suggest that you take a look at these trailers to get a better understanding of these movies. And I'll continue on with more comics, animes, and movies in the future, and at that time I hope you join us. And thank you very much for watching, and if you have any comments, please post them in the comments section below. And thank you in advance for your comments as always. And until the next time, happy comic reading, happy anime watching, happy movie watching, and as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.